Hey everyone, ready to dive into how stories like actual fiction can kind of unlock these deep truths about, life and the universe.
That sounds intriguing.
So we're taking a deep dive today into this article called The Alchemy of Fiction, How Storytelling Awakens Spiritual Understanding in Unprepared Minds.
Unprepared minds.
Right. It's by Kiersey Mekinen, and it's all about how fiction can sort of open up our minds to like new ways of seeing the world, even if we don't think of ourselves as like super spiritual.
I like that. It's almost like fiction can be this kind of Trojan horse for big ideas.
Totally. It sneaks in these profound concepts about life and reality, all disguised as a captivating story.
Yeah, exactly. And it bypasses our mental defenses.
It's like our brains don't even see it coming.
Right.
So right off the bat, the article talks about fiction as a safe space for transformation.
Yeah.
What do you think makes that safe space so important when we're, trying to wrap our heads around spiritual concepts?
Well, I mean, think about it. A lot of spiritual ideas, they challenge what we think we know about the world, right?
For sure.
Like the idea that we're all connected or that consciousness might exist beyond our physical bodies.
Yeah.
These concepts can be pretty jarring to our logical minds, right?
Yeah.
Our first instinct might be to just reject them outright.
Yeah, totally. It's like our brains want to hold on to what's familiar.
Exactly. But fiction lets us sort of explore those radical ideas without feeling threatened. We can suspend our disbelief and enter this world where those ideas are not only possible, but they're often central to the whole story.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about this phrase Kiersey uses, unprepared minds. What do you think she means by that?
I think she's talking about how many of us haven't really spent a lot of time consciously thinking about spiritual stuff.
Right.
We might be curious, but we also have doubts, right?
Yeah.
Fiction can be like this gentle entry point. It lets us engage with these concepts without feeling overwhelmed or pressured to believe anything specific.
It's like dipping our toes in the spiritual pool before diving in head first.
Exactly. And the article also brings up this cool idea about paradox, which kind of ties into the whole safe space thing. Fiction lets us hold these seemingly contradictory ideas in our minds. We don't have to, resolve them right away.
Can you give an example of that? What do you mean?
Oh, yeah. Time travel stories.
Okay, yeah.
Logically, the idea of existing in multiple timelines at once, that might seem completely absurd, right?
Yeah.
But in a story, we just accept it.
Yeah.
And that can, open us up to the possibility that reality itself might be a lot more complex than we think.
Our brains would probably short circuit if we tried to process that in real life.
Maybe.
But yeah, the story kind of gives us permission to play with those ideas.
Exactly. And this is where symbols and archetypes come in, which is another key point in the article.
Yeah.
Kiersey quotes Carl Jung, who said, "The soul speaks in images."
Yeah.
And fiction is inherently a language of images and metaphors and archetypes,
Oh, I'm starting to see the connections here.
Right.
The safe space lets us encounter these potentially mind-blowing concepts, and then the language of symbols speaks to this deeper part of us, bypassing our logical filters.
Exactly. It's a brilliant insight. And one of the most powerful archetypes we see is the hero's journey, right?
Right.
You think about characters like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars or Frodo in Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
They're both ordinary folks who get thrust into these extraordinary situations. They're forced to confront their fears, their limitations, their destiny.
I mean, we've all felt that pull towards something bigger than ourselves at some point, right? Of course. Even if our dark lords aren't as dramatic as Sauron.
Right. Exactly. These stories resonate with us so deeply because they mirror our own inner journeys. We see ourselves in those characters, and their struggles, their triumphs, they become a reflection of our own potential for transformation.
So we're seeing how fiction creates a safe space, uses symbols to kind of bypass our mental resistance, and it reflects our own journeys through archetypes.
Yeah.
It's like hitting all the right buttons to unlock these deeper truths within us.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another key point in the article, the power of imagination.
Okay, yeah.
Fiction allows us to experience concepts that might seem abstract or impossible if we just read about them in a factual way.
It's totally different to read about compassion in a textbook.
Yeah.
Versus feeling it through the eyes of a character who's going through like intense suffering.
Exactly. And this, again, it connects to the idea of unprepared minds, right? Our rational minds, they struggle to grasp spiritual concepts that don't fit into our, neat little boxes of understanding.
Right.
But imagination allows us to move beyond logic and experience these truths on a much deeper, more intuitive level.
It's almost like fiction gives us a taste of those aha moments that people talk about in spiritual circles.
Yeah.
It lets us glimpse a different way of seeing the world, even if we can't quite put it into words yet.
There's like a seed being planted,
Oh, yeah.
It might not sprout right away, but it's there waiting for the right conditions.
I can already feel my mind expanding. Okay, so we've covered safe space, paradox, symbols and archetypes, and the power of imagination. Where does Kiersey take us next in this exploration of fiction's alchemical power?
Well, she kind of goes into this idea of storytelling as like a form of initiation,
Initiation. Okay, I'm not sure I follow.
She's making a connection to how ancient cultures used myths and parables and rituals to like guide people toward a deeper understanding of things.
Right.
It wasn't just about entertainment. It was about transmitting wisdom and preparing people for life,
So are you saying that like getting lost in a good book can be a bit like going through a spiritual ritual?
Yeah, kinda. Think about those times when a story really grabs you.
Oh, yeah.
You feel transported to another world, right?
Yeah.
You're not just watching, you're participating, You're feeling everything the characters feel. And through that, you're also gaining insights into your own life.
It's like the story is holding up a mirror.
Exactly.
We see ourselves reflected back.
Right, and that can be a huge catalyst for, like, growth and transformation.
Okay, yeah.
It can help us face our shadows, embrace our vulnerabilities, and ultimately, like, step more fully into, who we're meant to be.
I'm seeing how this ties back to the whole unprepared minds thing.
Right.
It's like fiction is this safe, engaging way to deal with these huge questions.
Yeah.
The ones we might not even know how to ask in everyday life.
Absolutely. And that leads to another point she makes about unlearning. She says it's a crucial part of spiritual growth.
Unlearning.
Yeah. She's saying our minds, they cling to familiar patterns even when those patterns aren't good for us anymore.
Oh, tell me about it. I get stuck in my own head all the time.
We all do. And that's where fiction can be really powerful. It shows us alternative realities, different ways of seeing things.
Right.
Characters who, embody values that challenge our own.
Yeah.
And through those encounters, we can start to loosen the grip of our old stories, open ourselves up to new possibilities.
It's so true. I love how Kiersey calls the mind a storytelling instrument.
Me too.
It's like we're always creating our own realities through the stories we tell ourselves,
Yeah. And she even asks us to think about this. She says, do you notice what a storytelling instrument the mind is? And while you can be a reader, there still is the author too, somewhere. The same dynamic also happens in the reader's minds. They're not only one-sided party interjecting a story, but their minds also write a story, conclusions and reflections about it. The reader and the author are within each of us.
Whoa.
Right.
So if we can become aware of those internal narratives, maybe we can start to rewrite them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Fiction can be a model for that.
It shows us how to break free.
Yeah.
Embrace new perspectives.
I like that. Okay, this is really interesting. So I'm curious, where does she go from there? We've talked about this safe space, the idea of paradox, symbols, and archetypes, the power of imagination, this unlearning thing.
Yeah. So from there, she kind of bridges into this really interesting connection between science and spirituality.
Science and spirituality. Those two always seem kind of, at odds with each other to me.
I know. But fiction can it can weave those seemingly incompatible ideas together. It creates the space where they can both exist, even complement each other.
Okay, can you give me an example of how fiction does that? I'm not sure I'm quite picturing it.
Sure. Think about quantum entanglement.
Okay, yeah.
It's this scientific principle that suggests particles can be connected, even when they're super far apart.
Right.
It has really profound implications for how we understand consciousness and reality.
Yeah.
And it might sound like science fiction, but it's a real theory.
Right. So fiction can introduce these mind-blowing scientific concepts in a way that feels more, down to earth.
Exactly. It helps us contemplate these things without, getting bogged down in the jargon. It lets us explore those what-ifs that science is sometimes afraid to touch.
It's like it gives us permission to play with those ideas.
Right.
And who knows, maybe those imaginative leaps can lead to like actual scientific discoveries.
I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of groundbreaking stuff started in the minds of, writers and artists like Jules Verne. He was writing about submarines and spaceships way before they existed.
It's like fiction plants the seeds for the future. Not just technology, but spiritually too.
Exactly.
It expands our understanding of what's possible, and that can affect everything.
I love that. That's a beautiful way to put it. It leads perfectly into another key point Kiersey brings up, metaphors.
Oh, I love a good metaphor.
Me too.
Huh.
She argues they're more than just literary devices. They're a fundamental way we make sense of the world,
Yeah. It's like they cut through all the noise and get straight to the point.
They do. And they're super potent when you're trying to convey these complex spiritual or, psychological concepts, like, using darkness to represent our shadow selves or a hidden kingdom to symbolize our inner potential.
Can you think of a specific example where a metaphor like really nails it?
Oh, for sure. The cave allegory from Plato's Republic.
Oh, yeah. The one where the prisoners are chained and can only see shadows on the wall.
That's it. It's a really powerful way to talk about the limitations of how we perceive things.
Right. And the challenges of breaking free from those limitations to see the world as it really is.
Exactly.
So the shadows represent like our limited understanding.
Yeah.
And the journey out of the cave is the process of like spiritual awakening.
Yes, exactly. It's brilliant, right?
Yeah. It makes something that feels super abstract, a lot more concrete.
It's like they bridge the gap between what we can see and what we can't.
I like that. Okay, this is all really fascinating. So where does she go next? We've covered safe spaces, paradox, symbols, archetypes, imagination, unlearning, this connection between science and spirituality, the power of metaphors. Where does she take us in this last part?
Well, now she brings in this idea of embodied experience through narrative.
Okay, embodied experience. I'm intrigued. What's that all about?
She's emphasizing how spiritual wisdom isn't just about, understanding something intellectually.
Right.
It's about actually living it, feeling those truths in your core.
So it's not enough to just read about enlightenment or transcendence. We have to actually experience it.
Yeah. And that's where storytelling comes in. When we really get into a good story, we step into the character's shoes.
Right.
We feel what they feel.
Okay, yeah.
It's like, we're on the hero's journey with them.
So we're not just, watching from the sidelines. We're actually participating.
Exactly. Kiersey uses this phrase, become the journey.
Become the journey. It's like we're embodying those spiritual lessons that are woven into this story.
I get it. We might feel a sense of, ego death when a character goes through a big loss.
Yeah.
Or we might feel empowered when a character overcomes something really difficult.
Exactly. It's like when you finish a really powerful book and you feel like you've changed.
Oh, yeah. Like a part of you is different.
Right. And I think that's what she means by the alchemical power of fiction. It can transform us from the inside out.
Wow. That's powerful. Okay. So we've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have. Fiction is this safe space, the paradox thing, symbols and archetypes, imagination, unlearning, that link between science and spirituality, metaphors, and this whole idea of embodied experience.
Yeah.
Seems like fiction is so much more than just entertainment,
It is.
It's like a tool for growth.
It is. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is that we all have this inner storyteller. We're constantly creating our own realities with the stories we tell ourselves.
That's so true. And if we can become aware of those stories, those limiting beliefs, maybe we can change them.
Exactly. And fiction can help us with that.
Okay.
It shows us all the different ways we can tell stories,
right,
all the different perspectives we can take, and all the amazing journeys we can go on.
So reading fiction, even writing fiction, it can be a way of creating ourselves.
I love that. Yeah.
We're not just, absorbing stories. We're shaping our own narratives.
Exactly. And it leads to this final question that Kiersey asks. She says, if our minds operate through storytelling and fiction lets us explore new realities, could reading or writing fiction be a way to reshape our own inner narratives? Could it be a path to not only understanding, but transforming ourselves and our lives?
Wow. That's a really, really powerful question.
Yeah.
It's like we have more power than we think to to shape our lives. We're not just characters, we're the authors.
Right. And I think that's a really beautiful message to end on. I encourage everyone to check out Kiersey's article, The Alchemy of Fiction, and think about how storytelling might fit into their own journeys.
That's great advice. And, even if you don't think of yourself as a spiritual person, there's still something so powerful about getting lost in a good story. So pick up a book, watch a movie, maybe write your own story. You might be surprised by what you discover. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.